1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, the books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
When I grew up in Quitman, we didn't have the internet, obviously. We didn't even have BBSs or anything like that. Didn't have a modem. I didn't have cable TV. You just had the four channels on, that you could get with the rabbit ears. These kids would have had the internet, and so they were able to get music that I would not have been able to get in Quitman at the time, not without some serious work. Because I remember going into the mall in Meridian and seeing the records and stuff in Meridian, and might see a band like Venom, which when I started getting into heavy metal, Venom was like, oh, they're Satanists, man. You can't trust them. Okay, yeah. But these kids now would with the internet would have no trouble finding that, and they did, and they glommed onto it. One thing, once they get done talking with having the interviews with the kids, Jack stops Ben Blackledge, the attorney. What is in this for you? What's your angle here? And the lawyer put on an unconvincing expression that was a mixture of surprise and offense. Whatever do you mean? Jack fixed him with a knowing glare. You and I both know this band has no money. Hell, the singer's having to drive down here because he can't afford a plane ticket. They haven't sold that many CDs. And you have to know that precedent is against you in this kind of case. And Blackledge returned to stare. Are you always this cynical? The lawyer's eyes darted around the front of the house, making entirely sure the family couldn't overhear their conversation. Between you and me, I know there's no money in this. I'm not even charging a fee. This case isn't about this case. How so? This is a test case, running an idea up the flagpole, as they say. I won't see a dime from this case. I'm well aware of that. She probably won't either, and I'll likely lose. But if I win, there's precedent I can take to other cases against bigger fish that actually do have money. And a win pays off in publicity as well, so long as I make the case high profile enough. Well, now that's pretty shitty. But that's honestly how I feel some of the lawyers who might be representing people in cases like this have to be. They have to be thinking of it. It's a horrible, horrible way to look at it. But by the same token, people who feel like they have been mistreated by a system or other people need someone to represent them, even if that someone is just doing it for their own aggrandizement. In chapter 7, we first meet the singer who wrote this song, Mark Warren, and his lawyer, Mr. Watson, Arnold Watson, who's just there because he's on the shit list at his law firm, and he got stuck with this crappy case for a band that, doesn't make any money. Here's a fun fact. When I first wrote this book and published it and everything, apparently my editing on this particular book is worse than other books I've done. And granted, with editing and all that, you get what you pay for, and I paid for me because that's all I could afford. I've done better editing than this. So if you got a copy of this book to begin with when it first came out, and up until I reread this, you got a collector's item. You got me changing the name of a character midstream and never noticing it. I originally apparently called this character Mark Waller, which, fun fact, on my mother's side, somewhere in her family, she has Wallers, and I think that's where I probably got the name from. After using the name Mark Waller 12 times, and I know it's 12 times because I had to do a find and replace, I apparently changed his name to Mark Warren. And he's mentioned in later books in the series as Mark Warren. So, yeah. So again, editing is very important, and if you got this book and noticed the error, I'm so sorry. That was just bad. But I have corrected it, and I'm going to be uploading the new versions to the various outlets and get it corrected. I'm amazed that not only did I not notice it, but I don't think the guy who does the audiobook, I'm not sure he noticed it either. But most of the time we call the guy Mark and not Mark Waller or Mark Warren. So I can, see how that happened. But in the reread, I found that error and I have corrected the error. Whew. So Mark is a kid. Well, he's in his early 30s by this point, but he loves metal music and he's been in this band. And we find out after a little bit that not only is he, when he first gets there, he doesn't want to be there. He thinks this whole thing is ridiculous, and he's very petulant and dismissive of the whole thing, as any metalhead probably would be. But we come to find out as he talks to Jack alone in the next chapter that he actually grew up in Quitman and left there when his parents divorced in his teen years. And he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia as a child. He constantly heard what he thought were voices. He heard something talking to him. And it wasn't until he was like 9 or 10 where he started to actually recognize that the voices he was hearing, the things he was hearing, wasn't there. And he knew it wasn't there, but he couldn't stop it. And his parents, of course, took him to shrinks and all that, and of course they gave him things like clozapam and other antipsychotic drugs. Never really could get him. They would dull the edge of the voices, but they wouldn't dismiss it completely. Jack finds out all of this and agrees, not necessarily agrees to treat him, but at least agrees to talk to him and help him along the way. In Chapter 8, the conversation with one of the schoolmates of the kids. To be honest, as I have read back through the conversation with Lisa, I'm kind of 50-50 on if I was trying to trim this down for like an hour television show, whether I would leave this conversation out. I don't know. I think it was, again, well written. I don't know if I'm trying to be economical on time, if it added a whole lot to the overall story. Whereas with a novel, you can, blow things out, write it as long as you want, and be a little bit more, be a little bit less loose with having to be so, paring things down. But, if I had to cut something out of this story just to get, for time, this would probably be the thing I would cut out. In Chapter 9, we get the first real instance of the supernatural in the Metal Black. Jack has been called into a meeting with the two lawyers and the judge because the judge is ripping a strip out of both lawyers' asses because they've both been trying to dismiss the case or trying to get Jack removed from the case because he is an impartial. The plaintiff's lawyer's trying to get Jack removed because he may be impartial and may not, and he thinks Jack is immediately prejudiced because Jack doesn't believe this kind of stuff. Doesn't believe in imitable acts, which is what this case would have been based on. And the judge says, there's no damn reason. Both of you shut up before I throw you, give you contempt of court, throw you in jail. And let's move on. So Jack turns to go, and he begins to hear multiple someones actually, repeating the lyrics of that bridge from the song about, Sarah. Can you hear me, Sarah? Is this your blood on my hands, Sarah? And Jack turns around, and it's all three of the people left in the room, which was the plaintiff's attorney, the mother, and the judge. And from one line to the next, the lines go, one person says one line, another person says another line, third person says the third line, and it goes back and forth like a little sing-song chorus there. And Jack talks to the people and discovers that it's Bob, the entity that he thought was just one of George Baxter's personalities, or the personality that was killing people in George Baxter's body. But now either Jack is losing his damn mind and hallucinating, or Bob has followed him to Quitman, Mississippi. And again, as I said in the first video, Bob was kind of an homage to the Bob spirit entity in Twin Peaks. So this is very similar to that, in that Bob is not geographically linked. Bob will go and follow Jack. So this is Jack's confirmation that either he's going crazy or he's not going crazy, and there is a real link to the George Baxter case and to Sarah's case, and Bob is the most obvious connection. And Bob is the first one here to really start talking about the sleeper. It's the sleeper. He speaks, talks in his sleep, really, and his words are become reality, words that whisper into the ear of those able to hear. The listener tries to interpret the words into something he can understand, and those words get whispered into other ears that have waited for direction. Words become commands, and commands become actions. Actions are written in the language of blood. What does that mean? Who is the sleeper? Did that singer kill Sarah? You haven't been listening. I told you we killed Sarah. Actions must be written in blood. Blood can wake the sleeper, or it can sate him. Teresa Haynes spoke the last line with a stare that burned through Jack's skin into the core of his being. The song. The song is a song of blood. The song whispers into ears who wait for direction. We are but the stepping stone. And that little passage should be the one that tells Jack that this is something above and beyond even what he expected. There is something supernatural about this, and either something supernatural or Jack has really gone crazy. Jack had considered Bob the tortured creation of George Baxter's mind, an attempt by a damaged psyche to regain control over a frightening world. Bob had spoken through others now, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that it was George Baxter's mind that had been attempting to assert control over a traumatic event. Bob had followed Jack to Mississippi. Either Jack really was going absolutely bonkers, or something he couldn't even comprehend had begun to happen around him. Jack has a conversation with Dr. Martin Dyer, who even to this point in the books, I don't think I had completely grasped the importance he would have later. I can't actually remember if when I was writing this, and maybe spoiler for this, if I was writing this, when I was writing it, did I think of what Martin actually was at the time, or was I still just coming around to it? Because he's still just kind of a shrink. I don't even know that if you read this, you may not realize that the characters are meant to be friends outside of their meeting, because at the time, I don't actually remember if I was thinking that. Dr. Martin Dyer hasn't taken the prominence that he would. But Dr. Dyer does tell him, Martin tells him, not to immediately think that something he can't explain is a sign of his insanity. Because in this case, he may not be. It may not be a hallucination. And he says, look, I've done a lot of studies on parapsychology and things like that, and there are things that can't be explained. No.